So one time, like about a year ago, I was thinking, you know, I really like jigsaw puzzles, and this guy called Chris Yates, some of you may have heard of him, he makes a webcomic in which he takes photos of his friends while they make jigsaw puzzles and while they have fake adventures about making jigsaw puzzles. And I really liked his comic, and then I started looking at his web store obsessively and realizing that his puzzles were really expensive, but they were really awesome, and I thought, wow, I really want to do that. I want to make puzzles. So, being a programmer, I don't generally like to do things more than once that are the same. Because then that means that I'm repeating myself and I'm basically a robot. And that makes me angry and sad. So I thought it would be better if I came up with what are the mathematical rules of what a good puzzle is. What will puzzle people? So we have a laser cutter. So it takes flat things that are made of wood or other things, and it makes them into smaller pieces. So that seemed really applicable to the situation at hand. And as you see here, this is a bunch of lines. Now this was the first, this is effectively the first edition. This is 1.0 or 0.1 or something like that. I thought I'll just make a grid first. That is the simplest puzzle. And if you can't solve a bunch of squares into a square, then you really have problems. So let's make it into an actual puzzle by just moving the corners around a little bit until you're not quite a grid anymore. It's just a mess. Eventually it's going to be more crazy than that, but I sort of have become attached to this random, not really quite a grid book, because it drives people nuts, and once they start working on it, they just sit down and they stop doing what they were doing before. So one time I was hanging out with Steve, and I thought, you know what, it's time to stop thinking about this and do it. And it was about an hour of code to get effectively that. And I thought, okay, here it is. It goes. You see writing that is really badly contrasted? Can someone put lights or something? No, don't bother. It's not worth it. See, that's a program running that does stuff, and it's making it less and less random. And that's not, you see the lines there very vaguely. It's not meant for visual display, it's meant for turning into physical objects. So I sort of have to do stupid things like mess with the contrast so you can even see what I did. Stuff like that. Like this is just generated, there's a bunch of things here. See that? Very vaguely? Yeah. Left there? That's a new puzzle that no one ever saw before. And a program just made for me because I'm lazy and it did all the work. Up next is making ones that actually have the edges that are not straight lines. Stuff like that. But I have made a couple that are being passed around. You may have seen them. Here's one of the ones that I made that really made people completely nuts. These are 64 pieces here. It's about this big. And it's mostly painted with a repeating pattern. That took me and Tim a couple hours to solve one night. Remember how you didn't go home until it was really way too late to be awake, Tim? Anyway, the end goal here is to be able to take that program that I did, give it a couple more parameters, and say, you know, I want 12 puzzles about 2 inches by 3 inches. Make them wiggly, please. And I would like you to put them in an SVG. And then I would like to spend like literally 2 minutes to put them on the laser cutter, and then it will make a bunch of unique puzzles that no one's ever seen before, and will be suitably puzzling but not impossible, and you'll never really run out of puzzle because there will always be another one. So that's mkpuzzle. How much more time do I have?
2 minutes.
Oh,
it's minute 30 really.
Well, the next thing that is involved is I'm not going to go ahead and program a bunch of things like wiggly. I'm going to program, I don't know how many of you are programmers, but there's something called genetic programming where you can take one little step of a program and make it a gene. And make it like, oh, do this kind of randomness. Make a selection function that says it's okay or not that does this math. And I'm going to make a genetic programmed puzzle system such that I can say, you know what, I do like that puzzle, and I consider it wiggly, tagged as wiggly. And then you can say, okay, you can breed wiggly puzzles. And the end goal being that you can take genetic algorithms and say, you know what, I want to make a computer spend a bunch of time being creative for me. Because I can be creative, but I like to be creative en masse. So I like to take what I thought and then just make things so with a swath of bits. And that's
make it so.
Make it so, number one. But right now they're pretty time consuming. Like I had to sand all that, and MDF smells terrible when you laser it. Like I had no idea how terrible that would smell. It was absurd. My body smelled after I went home because I sat near it while I was sanding it. So I am currently working on working out the materials, stuff like which kind of wood works well, which kind of wood works badly, what kind of patterns go well on puzzles. Because just having a bunch of featureless squares is really irritating. People like to have something that connects the pieces together in a meaningful manner. They don't like to say, well, I successfully made a small board. Oh, I'm a winner. They like to see a beautiful picture. So, if anyone knows anything about laminating, talk to me.